Thank you so much for staying on the AM show, the Boxing Day edition, with me, Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah. Let's now delve into the conversation of our debt exchange program. We know the pension funds have been exempted, and the finance minister said that will come at an extra cost to us. And also, we know that individual bondholders have now been included in the debt exchange program, and it's been extended to the 16th of this month instead of 30th of this month. Plus, Clocksack accuses some corporate trustees of exploiting prior knowledge of the program to their benefit. Now, the big question is what lies ahead of us? What is this going to mean for our hope of securing that deal as soon as possible? Should government begin to look at reviewing this exchange program? We know that has happened already, but is it open to other suggestions and alternatives? Well, this morning I've been joined by Professor Lord Mensah, an economist with the University of Ghana Business School, and Professor Charles Aka, a fellow with ISER. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining the program.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Great. Let me start with you, Professor Lord Mensah, because you're reported as saying on the City Newsroom's online page that you didn't believe that exempting pension funds from the debt exchange program will come at any cost to us. Right now, we've seen what government has done with the inclusion of individual bondholders and the extension of the deadline. Do you still stand by your statement that this will not come at any extra cost to us?
We look at a new structure that has been proposed by the finance minister. Clearly, it's more or less captured even the pensions as well, because effectively our pensions are bound to invest, whatever the case may be. I mean, these are funds they are investing on behalf of, workers and contributors. So they may not want to, allow the funds to lie idle without any investment. So if you look at the new structures that is being proposed, I think most of the bonds will start maturing from 2027, which is 5 years from now, all the way to 2038. If you have collected people's funds, there's no way you will say that you're not going to invest. Definitely, you may keep that investment on behalf of the people. And so it's more or less a compact. And even the individual investors that have been had, if you take the composition of those holdings of the government bonds, you'll come to realize that the individual bonds are not that many. Most individuals invest indirectly, through institutions here and there. So effectively, it will definitely capture individuals as well. And what is more intriguing about the new structures that is being proposed is the maturity frame and then the 80% of assurance that is binding, of principal that is binding between the investor and then the government. So effectively, it has a way of capturing whatever is needed. But then I still stand by my statement that it won't come at a cost, because there's no way pension funds are going to say they won't invest in government instruments. So whatever new proposal that is coming is encompassed. Definitely institutions are going to invest in the new package.
Interesting. Can you explain further what that will mean to persons who are excited by the fact that pension... Hello, Prof? Hello, Professor Lord Mensah, are you there?
Hello, I'm here.
All right, sorry, there was a bit of...
It's a matter of understanding how investment works. And earlier on, I think the new, this new release, government was smart not to indicate the new structure in terms of interest payment or coupon payment. But then I can tell you that whatever the case may be, pensions are going to invest. So the understanding of whether your pension is going to be taxed or not to be taxed obviously depends on your investor or your fund manager. And I think it's about time the fund managers start holding emergency meetings with the, pension holders, so that they will explain to them the dynamics of investment. Because you may not want your investment to lie idle, right? Managing on behalf of people. So I believe the new structure that has come in gives some hope. And I think the way, like I said, pensions may be exempted, all right. But, pension fund manager may also not want investment or funds that he's managing to lie idle without investment in any instrument. So the new proposal that has come, which has maturity from 2038 with 5-year bond, all the way down to which has maturity from 2027, which is 5-year bond. In the worst case, we're going to get most of the pension fund managers investing in the 5-year bond. And when, it matures, possibly they may extend it for further 5 years to get to that 2038. So it's something that is binding indirectly.
Interesting. I don't know about other fund managers, but for me and some colleagues here, we've been reached out to for some explanation to be given about how our fund managers are going to be a part of the debt exchange program. But let me come to you, Professor Charles Aka, fellow with ISER. There have been so many issues surrounding the domestic debt exchange. One of them is about what CLOCSAG is complaining about. On Friday, there was a press conference held, and CLOCSAG claims that some corporate trustees took advantage of the debt exchange program because they had prior knowledge. Its executive secretary, Isaac Bampo-Addo, revealed that these trustees, per their prior knowledge of the program, converted their domestic bond holdings into foreign assets. He's calling on the National Pension Regulatory Authority to investigate these allegations. In the first place, why is this a problem? And if there is any evidence of such happening, what could it mean?
Well, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to you and your cherished listeners. I don't know whether CLOCSAG has such evidence, but it's entirely probable and it's feasible. In a developing economy where we have information asymmetry, some people, by their political connection or by their association with policymakers and regulators, may have some information that the common average Ghanaian or investor may not have. And the financial sector hinges strongly on information. Information is very critical. So it's possible that it's not only about even some individuals who sensed or picked a signal that their investment could suffer possible head cuts, those that have even invested in mutual funds and other collective schemes. They rush to go and redeem them, and some of them purchase dollars because they've suspected that the dollar was a more safer place as a store of value. Yeah. So people have acted individually based on other expectations or based on some informed decisions or information that they may have picked up from somewhere, whether from government or from some regulators. I cannot confirm, but I can't also rule out that that could be possible. And if it is true, it's actually unfair, and I think it's a failure of regulation to make sure that information is available to everybody so that people can make proper decisions and informed decisions. And if the information is such that a few people have it, then I think that would be unfair. But since I cannot confirm that, I don't want to hazard on that.
Right. So what this simply means is that other people may have undue advantage over others based on this allegation by CLOTSAG. Now let's move into the real issue of the debt exchange program. We've seen government postpone the deadline twice amid some modifications here and there. What signal does this send to you? Government is hoping to get a deal at the board level in the first quarter of next year, which we are entering to in a matter of days. Do you see this as a possibility? And if it won't be possible, what is likely going to happen as a result of that?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think what this tells us is that the government is under very serious pressure. These are difficult times. And it looks as if there's some amount of panicking in the policy circles that does not allow them to have evidence before coming up with some policies. And that's one of the things that we've done in this country. Whether it's the introduction of e-levy, whether it's the withdrawal of toll, or whatever it is, you don't have any empirical evidence. No research has gone into this kind of debt restructuring. I haven't seen one. There's not been any cost-benefit analysis that I've cited that shows what is going to be the overall impact of this debt exchange on our GDP growth, unemployment, and on macroeconomic stability, even on the debt sustainability. Okay, so we seem to be making decisions, and therefore we realize that it doesn't work. Look how much was expected from e-levy, about 6.5 billion, and we are not getting even 1 billion. Even for the next 4 years, they're expecting about 3 billion. So what went into the expectation that they will introduce e-levy at that high level, 1.75, and get Ghanaians to comply and get 6.5 billion? Okay, what went into the decision to cancel the toll booths because there are traffic at some point, and all the amount of money that's lost, and we now think of reintroducing it? So if the government now realizes that they need to extend the deadline, it's just showing that they're probably complacent and over-optimistic about the whole debt exchange, about the fact that people were going to accept it as it is. If they have now excluded pension funds, which for me shouldn't have been there in the first place, it was a socially, useless issue to include pension funds in such a draconian debt restructuring. Pensioners, people are 65, 80 years old, drawing their pension, some less than 2,000, 1,500 Ghana cedis a month, to buy drugs, diabetes drugs, cancer drugs, kidney drugs. Why would you want to tamper with that? Okay, so that's it shouldn't have been there at all. But again, that goes to tell us that it's not everything that the IMF says that we must just swallow as sacrosanct. I was expecting the IMF to have told the government to have excluded pension funds, but they looked at it and went back to Washington, and they seemed to think that it would be okay, despite the dislocation that it was going to cost to pensioners and to old people, and the inequality and the social stress it was going to bring into the economy. So I think there's still room for us to look at the whole debt exchange program again. I still think, despite I'm quite comforted by the press release and the modifications that have been made, but I think that we can still sit and still negotiate and still discuss. It also should not much discussions or negotiations went on with the various stakeholders. It looks as if this is coming.
Right. Prof, you talk about the modifications that you are happy about. In fact, government says that it extended the deadline to January 19 because it's hoping to, January 16 rather, I beg your pardon, because it's hoping to engage further. It says that these modifications were done considering feedback from the financial sector in relation to the need to secure internal approvals. Further, this extension affords government of Ghana the opportunity to consider suggestions made by all stakeholders with the aim of adjusting certain measures acceptable within the constraints of the government's debt sustainability analysis. Would you say that this seeming openness that we are seeing from government with regards to listening to other stakeholders and other opinions on this debt restructuring program came in a bit too late, considering the untidy nature with which we're doing some of these things now?
Yeah, I think it came in late, but probably not too late. Since we are still discussing with the IMF, a staff level agreement is not a final agreement. There's still room for negotiations. I wish that we have had these discussions earlier, but I've heard the government explain that because there were speculations and some misinformation going on, they had to come in to try to basically cure any mischief. And probably they announced the program before they could conclude negotiations. That's an explanation that I've heard. But I think that we need to still negotiate. And I think a lot of discussions could have been had before even the staff level agreement. It looks as if there's a lot of haste, and it's understandably so, because the way things were going and the exchange rate depreciating very, very fast, and the inflation now going over 50%. I think government wanted to do something. And then again, politically, there was a lot of heat on the Minister of Finance to resign and all of that. So you would expect that he must be seen to be doing something. But I think one of the things we need to look at is basically the impact, the overall impact of the debt exchange has to be quantified. And we need to look at alternatives. It looks as if the government is not considering any alternative. And I've heard some economists and some other people suggest that this is the only alternative. There's no other alternative beyond the IMF, and there's no other alternative beyond a debt exchange program, which I totally disagree. I think there are a number of attractive alternatives that government has not really considered. And if we consider them, it may either enforce our negotiations with the IMF, or it may actually come to show that we could actually do without the IMF.
Prof, do you mind sharing some of those alternatives?
Well, I mean, the first alternative, which I've been making that point over and over again for some months now, is that we need to look at the least costly and least disruptive policy option in times like this. Okay, so whether we are going to do a debt exchange or not, we need to make sure that the policies we introduce are the least costly and the least disruptive. And I think that the domestic debt exchange is not the least costly and it's not the least disruptive. It's going to cause a lot of disruptions and dislocations, even in the financial system. Many banks will struggle with their capital, and it's going to probably lead us to financial instability, financial crisis. And that's what the government is proposing, stabilization fund, because means that they anticipate that it's possible that this debt exchange could dislocate and bring a crisis in the financial sector. And that can be costly, and that can actually worsen our confidence. And already government is struggling since we had a financial sector cleanup. So my proposal, actually, is that if you look at the structure of the domestic debt, I don't want to talk much about the external debt. It's a different issue. But when you look at the domestic debt, the government, and I think Dr. Lord Mensa already alluded to the fact that most of the domestic debt, they are going to mature in about 5 years' time. So why would government want to rush into a debt exchange program for debts that are due in 5 years' time, which if we invest in the economy and the economy grows in 5 years' time, and we embark on an aggressive domestic resource mobilization, heavy taxation, and bring everybody or most people into the tax net, we could actually finance the debts that will be due in 2027 and beyond. I think the most critical is what happens in 2023 and probably 2023 to 2025, the time that we are under the IMF program. These are the most immediate debts we need to look at. And when you look at that, in 2023, only about 37 billion Ghana cedi principal of the government bonds, ESLA bonds, Dachi bonds will be due. 37 billion. So and government is not suggesting that we cannot find 37 billion Ghana cedi or say 40 billion Ghana cedi in 2023 from this domestic economy unless we zero coupon or we restructure our domestic debt. I don't think so. Even if you look at the budget, 2023 budget, there's already a provision made for about 31 billion for interest service, domestic interest service. That is there, and it's Parliament's program approved. In 2024, we have about 52.7 billion allocated to service domestic debt. Okay, so that means that tax revenue is what we need to look at. Are we taxing enough, high enough? Is the corporate tax, can we adjust it? We have already adjusted the VAT by 2.5%. Is that all we can do? Can we tax the rich more corporate firms that are making rich a lot of money, the companies that made a lot of windfall profits last year, can they be brought in to contribute more? Look at the informal sector. Look at the self-employed. Self-employment is contributing just about 800 million to our tax, when about 80% of the labor force is in self-employment. So if all the people that are in self-employment engage in Makola, Abobloshi, Kumasi, Kejetia, all of them, millions of people, even if each of them was paying 50 Ghana cedis a month, that's more than 800 million. So already it means that government, the revenue office, has not been aggressive enough to tax people. I spoke to a barber recently, that's my barber, and I asked him, do you pay tax? He says, no. This is a barber that barbers about 20 to 30 people a day, and he charges about 15, 20 cedis per person. So when you calculate that, his income is more than a university lecturer's salary. The university lecturer is paying about 20-25% of his salary into tax. This barber, hairdresser, mechanic, we see them, they are not in the informal economy, they are formal, they are on the street. We know them in the assembly. He told me that he pays only about 57 Ghana cedi a year to the assembly. That's whether that's registration fee or whatever it is. But beyond that, he's not being taxed. And he's making more than 6,000 Ghana cedi a month. So if we ask this barber to pay even 100 Ghana cedi a month, or 200 Ghana cedi, or 5% on his revenue, that would be about 300 Ghana cedis.
But
and there are millions of such people.
Right. Prof, but this suggestion you give, there are those who say that it's a fine suggestion, but considering where we are and the short time within which we need to salvage our economy, this may be a long-term approach to solving the problem. While answering that, there's also the bit on when the announcement was given by government about a decision to go to the IMF, and the information minister was specific. He said, look, this is to deal with a balance of payments. We will introduce other revenue mobilization measures. So government is hoping to do multiple things while going to the IMF.
I agree. So the balance of payment issue has to do with our export. So it's when a country is not able to export aggressively and to make more export revenue and attract more foreign direct investment, which is more sustainable, and rein in more remittances, that the country suffers a balance of payment issue. So basically, it means that our inflows of foreign currency has not been able to match our outflows in terms of our import. So government is already doing something about the dependence on import, and that is supposed to reduce substantially. One of it has to do with our oil import, and I think we need to do something about it. I have some policy discussions about that later on, we could discuss that. But our export, we need to look at how we can raise more export. And if the government decides to go to the IMF, that's fine. It's going to get about $3 billion to support the balance of payment. But that should not come at a cost of disrupting the whole domestic economy. Because basically what happened in Jamaica, what happened in Greece, if you look at the literature, it increased poverty and unemployment and a lot of discolorations. In fact, Jamaica had to do the debt exchange twice within 3 years because the first one was not successful. Poverty increased, unemployment increase, it actually led to some kind of social riot. We've seen that kind of thing before, even in Ghana here. Okay, under Busia administration, when Busia came into power, there was a lot of debt that he inherited from the previous government. And in trying to restructuring this debt, he went about and nobody was willing to do that, all the international creditors. He went into an IMF program. The IMF program was very draconian, the austerity was too harsh, and there were demonstrations all over in Accra. And actually that was part of the reason why Achampong came to lead to the overthrow, because there was total chaos. So we have seen the cost, the social cost of domestic debt exchange. And if it's not necessary, we don't need to go there. We could actually engage on the external sector. Where our problem is coming from is not domestic. It's the fact that we have overexposed our economy to foreign debt. And the servicing of the foreign debt, we don't have the dollars to service it. And that has put pressure on our exchange rate. And that's why we are going to the IMF. But it seems as we are going to the IMF may be demanding that for equity reasons and fairness, you cannot restructure your external debt unless the Ghanaians are also willing to bear some of the cost. And therefore, we want to show to our external creditors and to the IMF that we are willing also to engage in a domestic debt exchange. But I think we need to begin to talk to the IMF. We have an economy to protect. We have jobs to protect. We have employment to protect. We have poverty to reduce. And therefore, we have the political security to protect. And therefore, any suggestion that IMF is giving about the domestic debt exchange, we need to look at what is the effect. Finally, this is my proposal. My short-term proposal is this. There's a reason why every sovereign country has a central bank. The central bank is the lender of last resort. The central bank is the only country that is the only bank that is actually the government's own bank. And in terms when the government is in a crisis and having liquidity problem, the central bank is the first place to run to for cover. Now, when you look at the debt that the government has, 137 billion Ghana cedis domestic debt, about 40 billion of that is owed to the central bank. And I am suggesting that even if we agree to have a domestic debt exchange, instead of dislocating the financial sector and trying to have a debt exchange that involve all these pension funds and these commercial banks and these insurance companies and co. For 2023, 37 billion Ghana cedi that will be due. Even if you add 2024, 15 billion, 2025, 15 billion. So for 2023 to 2025, the next 3 years under an IMF program, all the government requires is less than 70 billion Ghana cedi, 67 billion. That 67 billion, I am saying that the Central Bank of Ghana could take off and assume that debt, which means that the central bank is going to purchase that debt from all the commercial banks and the insurance companies. And then the central bank will be the single creditor to the government. So then the central bank will actually be, the government will be owing the central bank about 107 billion Ghana cedi when they add it to the already debt. That's just about 13% of 2023 GDP and about 70% of 2023 GDP. In comparative terms, compared to Malaysia, compared to South Korea, compared to Japan, compared to Germany, compared to US, even US, this is low. Since 2008, when we had the global financial crisis, it had become conventional for central banks to come in to engage in what they call quantitative easing or unconventional monetary financing of the government so that they don't dislocate their economy. And the only risk in this is that it would increase the monetary base and it could increase inflation. Inflation could increase. And that is the only risk. And that is a less distortionary, less costly than because we have tools to deal with inflation. If inflation goes beyond the expectations where we are, we have taxes in the fiscal policy. We have the monetary policy to increase interest rate and to use the reserve requirement ratio to rein in that. At the moment, the inflation that we are having in Ghana is a bad inflation. It's inflation that the monetary policy is not able to rein in. Despite the fact that they have increased the policy rate by about 1,250 basis points since January, inflation is still going up, both producer price inflation and consumer price inflation. It tells us that this inflation is external, is supply side, it's not something that we can fight easily, and it's bad. It does not help at all. There's good inflation and bad inflation.
Right.
If we increase the money supply, and that brings in aggregate demand, and that creates jobs, and that stabilizes our financial sector, and that brings in an additional 2, 3, 5, 10% inflation, that is good inflation. And if we think that that is extraordinary inflation to reduce, it can be reduced with the standard tools that we have, both fiscal and monetary policy. And you will see that this kind of debt restructuring will not involve pension funds. It will not involve the commercial banks. It will not affect financial instability or anything. It is just going to be between the government and its central bank, that the central bank has probably been exposed and it has now acquired more debt, and therefore we need to look at how to pay that debt over time. And and for me, that's the most immediate, sensible policy proposal to avoid a dislocation of economy.
Right, Professor Lord Mensah, in his submission, Professor Aka gives the Jamaican example, and during the time he announced the debt restructuring program or the debt exchange program, the finance minister mentioned Jamaica and Greece, where he mentioned that in Greece it was not voluntary, it was backed by law, but in Jamaica it was voluntary. And he suggested that he didn't want us, or government didn't want to get to that point. Do you see us getting there with all the pushback and modifications we are seeing?
Well, I don't think we'll get there. Whether it's going to be voluntary or it's going to be involuntary, it depends on the economic structure. If you have an economy where, a chunk of the investment is in government debt, then obviously, the investor will be forced to conform or adhere to whatever restructuring that is, coming through. If you look at, the composition of our, debt, you could see that about 23% is only in pension. So exemption of pensions means that other, investment can be sacrificed. Now, you realize that government removed pensions. Now it's saying that we're going to include individual investors who are investing directly into government bonds. Now, the terms as a result of interest payment and all those, 2023, government seemed to be, if you look at the first statement, the statement that was issued, government is preparing to pay for, bonds that are maturing in 2023. So the new restructuring that is coming up, gives way, which will have no option for other financial institutions to buy into it. Because when your bond gets matured in 2023 and you receive your, interest payment and coupons, obviously you may have no choice than to reinvest. And looking at inflation now, you are better off reinvesting than, keeping the money idle. So, in the end, what the new structures that are coming seem to be a bit flexible and seem to, absorb, all the, investable assets into the folds of government. So I believe that it's something that government may have to, sit down and let the people be aware that this is what we need to restructure, the economy, to make the economy, to make the economy find its footing. And at the end of the day, we may all end up, enjoying, into the future. The same new structure, indicate that we're going to have bonds that are maturing from 2027 all the way to 2028. If it's trust and if it's possible, mistrust that you have in government. As far as our, pensions regulation is concerned, pensions have about 75% minimum to be invested in, government bonds. And so what the government is proposing, most of these bonds are 5 years and above, and we're going to see maturities from 2027 all the way to 2038. So if you're a pension fund manager and you think, you don't have trust in the government for you to invest in that long term, which will be about, let's say, a 15-year bond or let's say 10-year bond, then you may have perhaps do, 5 years, which will be from 2023 to 2027. And then from there on, maybe you can decide to reinvest or whatever you will do with your funds. You indicate that as far as your investment matures. So with a new structure, I think government is becoming a bit softer, from, its end to get a buy-in of the investors. And we hope that investors will come to appreciate some of this restructuring that is ongoing.
Right. I'm just going through some of the comments. We are live on Facebook, and there are those who are still concerned about no show when it comes to what real commitment government is putting in terms of cutting down its expenditure. There are those who say, hold on with the programs. For our editorial last week, we spoke about the National Cathedral and the other pressing needs for Ghanaians. This comment I'm referring to on our social media page also spoke of saying there is, it appears, a bit of hesitancy by a lot of people to get onto this debt exchange program. Do you believe that government can get or win back the trust of the investor community by making some of these bold decisions?
Yeah, it has to do with government also sacrificing its part to get a buy-in of the people. You see, I've been making this statement. I think your people are about to, understand. I said, what is the government exchanging for this debt exchange? We should understand that, debt is a counterparty agreement. And if you are pushing a sacrifice to a counterparty, it is also important for the bondholder, the issuer, to also absorb certain, sacrifices, and also the assurance that the benefit that we're going to accrue from this, whole exercise of debt restructuring. What is the assurance that government will use the possible inflows as a result of interest sacrifices judiciously? History has never supported us on this, as far as government structures and expenditure lines are concerned. So if people are calling for government to reduce the number of ministers, to reduce the number of ministries and all those, it's all part of the a way of ensuring that when we go into the whole debt restructuring, the benefit that comes across, government may use it judiciously. If you look at the entire exercise, which is the debt restructure, it's an economic exercise, which my colleague Professor Aka indicated. There is a benefit to it, and there is also a cost to it. The benefit is that government is going to free up that fiscal space to ensure that they operate comfortably. The cost will be that if we don't get the buy-in of the people, and then in the end, it backfires, like what we're about to witness when it comes to labor front, hinting on a whole country kind of strike, which is going to go a long way to affect production. On the other hand, if you look at the trust that the investor community is going to have in government instrument, that will also reduce. So those are the costs that needs to be managed very well. But then if you look at the benefit, another question we're asking is, how is the government going to ensure that the benefit that comes from this, debt, restructuring exercise is used to turn the economy around, so that whatever is being sacrificed, investors can reap it in the long run. Remember, everything is about timing, because if we go into this and it turns up that government is not able to use whatever proceeds as a result of this interest, payment, is going to, push the economy down further. So I believe that calling for, government to downsize its number of ministers and all those, sacrificing part of the of their expenditure lines are all, measures to ensure that whatever benefit we're going to accrue from this exercise, it is used, for the purpose to turn around, the economy. But with the current, structure that we have, it's not supportive of, ensuring that the proceeds that we're going to have, we're going to use it as expected. Because we know that it's the same structure that has sent us to, the kind of economic quagmire that we find ourselves in. So if we don't do anything about the structure, then obviously people will question what shows that, this sacrifice that we're going to do, you can use it to the interest of, the people. So it's a right call. And I believe that for the government to get a buy-in of the people, not just to look at the restructuring, the timing and extension of, date of settlement of this new bond, but then also look at, the way they can reduce, government expenditure, especially the discretionary ones. I mean, the ones that goes into capital expenditure and the ones that goes into goods and services. Government has control over them, and I believe that it's something that they can look at.
Finally, gentlemen, the Imani Reckless Index or Recklessness Index has put the Finance Ministry at the top again, and this is for the 6th consecutive time. The index or the report found out that the Finance Ministry is responsible for 99.63%, that is 9.10 billion cedis of the combined 9.12 billion tax irregularities from 2015 to 2020. And this is the Finance Ministry that is supposed to oversee all that we're going to do with the IMF and our general economy. Do you get a sense that we need to have a certain overhaul? Does this feed into the concerns that we need to ask the finance minister to leave and get a new person? Your brief thoughts on this as we wrap up the conversation.
Yeah, these are all signals that are on the ground that people have picked, and they keep on, hammering that the structures must change. The structures may not be just downsizing. Some personalities, must change, and that should be able to help us. Because if you don't change the structures and we still have the same personalities in place, that means that, whatever benefits that we're supposed to enjoy from the entire exercise, looking at IMF program and now, the preparation towards the IMF program, which is the debt exchange program, and then also getting the IMF program, the assurance that we can use this kind of, new policies to restructure or to change the economy is not there. And so if you have a whole finance ministry topping, tax evasions here and there, then it's quite questionable. That's why I believe that some structures must change.
Right. Professor Aka, what about you?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think that, it's unfortunate, but it's not, I don't want to make this finance minister's issue. We have had independence since about 65 years ago. And it looks as if we have been quite complacent and quite mediocre with governance. And I think it's about time we became quite serious about governance and corruption and wastage and misallocation of resources. And I don't know what civil society has to do. Parliament, I don't think, has done the best oversight over the executive and Auditor General and co. They just bring out a report, and I don't think people have been surcharged. People have not been penalized for things that they have to do. So sometimes you just, whether it's from a nurse or from somebody, some investigative report will come. Some people will be accused and they'll go to court for 10 years, 20 years, and then they are left off the hook or they are never jailed or whatever happens. These things do not augur well for confidence and trust and for people wanting to contribute into the economy, even to pay their taxes. Okay, so if we see those kind of things going on, and when you see in the midst of poverty, in the midst of youth unemployment, every 3 young people you see in the country, one is unemployed. Okay, youth unemployment, graduate unemployment, poverty. Everywhere you pass in this country, you see potholes, you see terrible roads in our communities on the highway. Why should we be in Ghana after 65 years of independence and we still don't have a dual carriageway or motorway that links the capital city of Accra to the next second largest city in Kumasi, to go to Tamale or to Takoradi or to Aflao? After 65 years, with all the gold and all the resources we have in this country. So when you compare ourselves to Malaysia, to South Korea, to China, to countries that we started together, I think we have been joking. And I think some of these things we need to take seriously. The president need to call the shot, and he needs to fire people, discipline people, reshuffle when that is necessary. That will introduce confidence into the system and encourage the ordinary people to pay their taxes. Many people are paying taxes in the UK, high taxes. Our tax to GDP is still around 13%, less than 25% that we expect to be as a middle income country. We don't pay taxes here, and because people think that, look, where they live, they don't see the role of the government. They are living in a place where people don't still have potable water in this country. People don't have electricity. They don't have accessible roads. And you're asking them to pay e-levy. You're asking them to pay another increase in VAT. You're asking them to pay their taxes.
Property rates.
Property rate. I mean, you live in a place
where
where
the road leading to your house is not good.
It's not good. So, and then if you see that the executives are spending it on largesse, and then I don't think that's something that's good. So I think we need to look at that. And even though we are discussing it now, it affects the current government, it affects the finance minister now, but it's historical. It's been something we have been dealing with over the last 60 years. And I think it's about time both the political parties and then the parliament take this matter seriously.
Thank you so much, Prof and Prof. It's been a pleasure having you. And let me say thank you so much to Professor Lord Mensah, who's been a regular on the show. Even as we wrap up the year, thank you for contributing and analyzing some of the key economic issues for us here on the AM show. Happy New Year to you, and Merry Christmas rather, and a Happy New Year to you, Prof and Prof.
Thank you very much. Happy returns.
Great.
Have a blessed New Year.
You too. Right.